Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the season premiere of Moon Knight, The Goldfish Problem on Disney Plus. And this was a kind of weird pilot episode to me. Like, if somebody watched it and was not really feeling it or feeling drawn into it, I would not blame them for that. Now, I did enjoy that we kind of got a little bit of our toes dipped into, like, the Egyptian mythology and everything like that, because that's a very interesting mythology, and you don't usually see a lot of places kind of, like, going into it and everything. However, the problems kind of creep up into how everything's kind of presented and executed, in my opinion, rather than any kind of base thing going on, because we're really kind of thrown in the middle of it, and it kind of helps us to kind of like at least empathize with Stephen Grant. However, it's just kind of, you know how a show tries to play up a mystery as much as possible, but you've already kind of got an inkling of what that mystery is, so you're essentially kind of sitting back, kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop. That is kind of what kind of goes on here. Now, granted, I understand given a long enough kind of timeline and stuff, you see a lot of media and you see a lot of stories, and you kind of get that ebb and flow, and you kind of understand and kind of are able to kind of predict certain kind of things. But it all kind of goes into how you can execute and how you can do things within a property. So how you execute it and how you kind of go about and the characters to kind of draw you in can kind of like help mitigate with that. Now, I'm not saying that this is complete and utter crap. It definitely needs to kind of fine tune itself, and the thing is, you're only given 6 episodes to kind of do this, so it's kind of like, we'll kind of have to see how it works out. So, this episode starts off with kind of my least favorite thing, because we are just introduced to the villain with no dialogue or anything like that, and we're just shown what this villain is doing. And normally that would be able to kind of give you insight to the character or whatnot, but for me, it takes away the context of why this is kind of important until we kind of go throughout later on and understand his stuff. And I don't think it is the strongest way to start this kind of episode, because we just see Ethan Hawke as Arthur Harrow there, just first pouring water, drinking from it, doing some weird stuff with it, folding it up in this cloth, smashing it with this kind of alligator, crocodile kind of cane thing, and then taking the broken glass, putting it into some sandals, and then putting his feet in it, and then walking to wherever he's going while like Bob Dylan is playing. And that would be more interesting if we had a little bit of the character to kind of like get onto it, but it didn't really draw me into the episode or get me connected to this character in any way. It's more like, okay, I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to be asking why he's doing this, and I am, but I'm not really that interested in it, because I'm just like, okay, I need more context to why this is important and why this is informing me about this character. I could almost just cut it out, because I get more of that stuff for him later on within the episode. So then we are introduced to Stephen Grant as he does these weird kind of rituals to kind of keep himself in check. Like, evidently, he walks around in his sleep or whatnot, according to himself. He, like, straps himself down to his bed. For some reason, he has a sand circle around his bed. He's talking to his one-fin goldfish, kind of like Nemo, kind of feeding it and everything, calling his mom, but never getting his mom, and leaving her voicemails. He would tape up the door to make sure that he hadn't left, and then we see that he's trying to figure out. We see that he's a very kind of self-deprecating kind of like dude that really doesn't like himself, kind of, even though, and we see that kind of manifest as he's like, oh, yeah, okay, just how he kind of talks about himself, how he talks to this one dude as he goes, oh yeah, you're in front of my place selling all these brooms and everything like that, and being very kind of passive in his aggressiveness of like doing all that kind of stuff and not really being confrontational. that becomes important later on as we kind of go throughout the episode. So then he misses his bus, but he's able to kind of get onto it. We see that he really doesn't get much sleep because he's like pretty much sleeping on a dude. And then we see him go into this museum, which has this Egyptian exhibit. We see him kind of talking with, I would say that they're characters, but we're not really given much else into them other than the scant interactions and how they kind of connect with Steven, i.e. his boss that pretty much constantly berates him and everything, this security guard dude, and this tour guide lady who's like, hey, are we on for Friday or whatnot at 7 for, like, the steakhouse? Is like, yeah, sure. And the boss lady's like, oh, I didn't know that you shot your shot. And he's like, I didn't know either. And he's like getting ready to kind of do that, and he's like, all right, cool, as she then kind of like hits him for inventory and saying that he does odd kind of stuff, and he corrects her on his name and everything like that, brings up to her that the Egyptian exhibit with the like marketing is incorrect because it only has 7 of the Ennead gods of the Egyptian mythology. Ennead, E-N-N-E-A-D, I believe, is what it was. The Ennead, yeah. How I think that's how he pronounced it or whatnot. I'm like, ooh, okay, that's kind of interesting. And she's like, fuck it, whatever, just go do whatever the fuck I told you to do, kind of shit. It's like, all right. And we're seeing him be kind of klutzy and everything like that. It's like, all right. We see him kind of just pretty much waiting out, talking with this one dude about like his life and all that, who's just like this statue kind of dude, but he seems to be the only kind of person that kind of listens to him. And we see that he kind of helps out some tourists and like taking pictures and all that kind of stuff, but then he goes to bed and he then wakes up in I actually don't know where. Now, granted, this kind of helps us to identify with Steven, as he's like, what the fuck? He's like, his jaw's kind of fucked up, he's bleeding and everything. He's like, what the fuck? He like gets up, he's like, where the hell am I? And then these people start shooting at him and he's like running and he's like, this voice is talking. He's like, shit, the parasite, the coward dude is pretty much in control. Shit, hand control back over to Mark or what. And I was like, what the fuck? And we see kind of bits and pieces of this kind of figure in the background. It's like, ooh, okay. But then we see him kind of get into the village, and then we see this whole kind of thing go out as we see that this dude is trying to make this perfect world, and it's the Haro dude. And evidently he's got these scales, and he's pretty much judging people. We mainly just get 2 judgments, and he's like, let's see if you are to be in this new world. One dude's judged to be good, this other woman is judged to be wanting, and is her life force looked sucked out as she was like, looked like it was killed. It's like, what the fuck? And then we see that the rest of the town is pretty much followers of whatever kind of thing he is, as we learn later in the episode. And he like pretty much like, the dude got the scarab, I don't know where he's at. He's like, all right, followers, pretty much kneel. And then Steven's like, shit. He's like, okay, give me the scarab. And then we get this whole kind of thing as his body is stopping him, and this voice is telling him not to give him the scarab. And then he would kind of black out, and then, well, he tried to run away, and then this group kind of like got him, and then he blacked out, and then all 4 of them were knocked out. I was like, what the fuck? And then he starts to kind of like run and gets into like this cupcake man, and then we begin the kind of action chase sequence that I really did like and was not up to par with the usual kind of Marvel action sequences to me. Okay, this mainly boils down to the CGI being really below the standards that Marvel usually does. It really did not look like it worked right. Why do I say this? It seems like they decided to focus more of their budget on the character that we kind of get introduced to and his whole kind of Moon Knight kind of persona, and that we had to utilize this as he's like trying to escape this and going back and forth between this someone else controlling his body. And the only kind of thing that I have criticism wise on that part as well is that we don't get to see the kind of cool action scenes that inform us of the character Mark, where Steven just keeps like shutting in and shutting out and him trying to deal with the insane situation, which is good on his part, but I hope that we potentially get a thing where we kind of see some stuff from Mark's perspective as he's doing all this kind of stuff and doing all these kind of action scenes. However, we see him kind of like utilizing the cupcakes, taking out certain cars, utilizing these kind of like logs and shit like that. It was okay. I mean, it did get us into the headspace of Steven, of like how crazy it is that he's in the middle of this situation and flipping back and forth between being conscious and unconscious. However, the CGI really was not good. I'm like, what the fuck? But then he kind of gets to a point where he gets kind of knocked out again, and he then wakes up back in his apartment and thinks that it is a dream. He gets ready for his date, but finds out that it is Sunday and that he has missed 2 days and that she was pissed at him, and we get this little thing of telling him to pretty much lose her number as he then orders a steak at the place, and we just see the kind of crestfallen kind of nature on his face. I'm like, okay, I kind of get the character, dude, but you're kind of like messing with it at this point. It's like, alright, I like when it hits enough with this, but there's just something off about it. Like, I'm like, alright. Like, if we had known more about the character, or had that he was interested in, or seen how much that he liked her, but this is the first episode and we don't really have that much. We kind of get it through this scene where he's like just really crestfallen and everything, and that at least works enough. I just needed a little bit more, not that it was complete crap, mind you. So then he's trying to figure out kind of what's going on. He comes back in and he also sees that his fish has 2 fins now. He went to the fish place and it's like, what the fuck? Like, yeah, he goes to the workplace and is trying to figure out what's going on. I might be doing those a little bit out of order. No, he did the steak thing first, and then he goes and he tries to give chocolate to the fish and everything like that. Well, no, he also has a confrontation with Haro in the museum, because he goes in, he's like, oh god, yeah, that's when he was trying to figure out what was going on with the fish. He then gets to his job and is getting tailed by Arthur, and he's like, tells the security guard to try and watch out for him. And then, of course, that's when it gets to the whole kind of like stakes thing. But Arthur's like, because he brought up that his name was Stephen Grant of the gift shop, pretty much trying to figure when he was being confronted by Arthur in the weird little village. And he's like, it really wasn't that hard for us to kind of like find you. And he brings up this whole thing of like Amet. That's the kind of god that he is brought up. And we also see that Stephen also was terrorized by this strange-looking figure. If you looked into Moon Knight, this is Khonshu. He is the avatar Khonshu, the moon god. And it's god of like vengeance and all that kind of stuff. And that stuff looked really kind of well. I did like the creepiness of that. And of course, Arthur here is bringing that up of like, it's kind of hard. Amet wants to prejudge people. Pretty much kind of a Minority Report kind of thing. Judge you past, present, future. If you're found wanting on either kind of thing, you're pretty much destroyed, trying to make this perfect world. Evidently, indolent gods, according to Amet, and also being betrayed by her avatar, led to her being kind of like screwed over. And that Arthur's bringing up that it's so hard to kind of like be listening to that and to the voice in your head and not being able to provide them what they want or whatnot, because he's trying to like figure out what's going on with Steven. And he also tries to do the whole scales thing. He's like, I sense much chaos in you. And chaos is a big kind of concept within the whole, well, it's a big concept in all kind of mythologies, but it's also a big kind of concept and kind of central to stuff going on with Egyptian mythology as well. But also going on with Stephen Grant, because he's got different kind of personalities within his head. But there was a giant group that kind of came in, and Stephen was able to kind of get away, and he's like, what the fuck's kind of going on? That brings us back to like he's looking at stuff in his apartment and giving like chocolate flakes to his fish because he decided to eat all of the candies that he had brought for the date. But then he notices something on the floor and shifts things over and is able to find this like cell phone in this kind of key thing, and he sees all these missed calls from Layla, and he like calls it. And no, this is where the whole Khonshu thing pops up. Yeah. Sorry. We see all this kind of stuff going on, and it's like, alright, cool. I thought that would be. No, this is where the Conchu stuff pops up. Because he calls the number, she calls him Mark, and he's like, what the fuck are you doing with that kind of accent and shit? And he's trying to figure out what's going on, but she hangs up. And then there's this voice telling him not to kind of go for this kind of shit. He's trying to, like, see what's kind of going on, tries to get out of there, and of course that's where the whole Conchu thing happens, as we see this lady being like, what the fuck's going on with you? And then she leaves. And we see that he's trying to kind of, like, figure stuff out. Is in the museum later at night, and this jackal kind of creature pops up, and Arthur's like, hey, just give us the scarab and we'll be done. And he starts running away from it, and he's locked into a bathroom with no way out. And then, of course, Bart pops up and he's like, listen, let me take control and I'll save us both. Alright? And he says, alright, cool, I'll let you do that. And then he does it. He, of course, transforms into Moon Knight as the jackal pops in, and we don't really see much until we see the end, where we've seen pretty much most of the trailer. As he beats it down, he looks into the camera and then walks off the camera, and that's where the episode ends. And I'm interested to kind of see how more of this kind of goes, because dealing with a character that has multiple personalities is always a kind of tricky thing of how you center the story. And it's kind of weird in how they're doing it execution-wise here. I almost would have needed an episode where Steven is maybe at least halfway going through most of his daily life and kind of connecting with him before shit starts getting weird. I need to understand his kind of baseline normal before I understand what goes outside of his realm of normal. Because here we're kind of thrown in, and his normal is kind of abnormal, and we're not acclimated to that enough before things start moving on. Why? Because we've only got 6 episodes, and so we've got to make sure that we're going through fast enough for the plot. Otherwise, we're not going to get to the places that we get to. However, even in the beginning of this episode, I've already seen some stuff that can be cut. Like, with what Arthur's talking about, I just got a clear picture of what he is when he kind of, like, plot dumped what was going on with him and Ahmet. It's like we've already got our villain and kind of what they're doing. We might need a little bit of information to color in for value add, but we've got that completely set up. He needs a scarab for something, probably detailing something within his plan to maybe do a more massive scale kind of judgment on everything going on. And Khonshu and Mark don't want that shit to go down. It's really kind of weird, because on one hand, I do like that Marvel's diving into more of the supernatural kind of stuff, but I kind of almost would have rather had Moon Knight's first kind of thing being more street level, and then kind of building up to that kind of thing, because normally he's more street level kind of stuff. Granted, because of his power set and what he can kind of do, he can fluctuate onto kind of bigger end kind of things. But to, like, introduce us to this character, I think this was a kind of weak first episode for that. Not that they completely failed, but it didn't hit the spots that I normally would have liked them to, and especially with the quality of the CGI in that kind of action chase sequence. To be perfectly honest, if you're going to be playing off that Steven would pop up at really odd, strange intervals, it would have just been better to have him in a warehouse or whatnot with as minimal CGI as possible, to then have that budget done for Khonshu and the whole Moon Knight costume taking on effect. I would rather have you put the money onto those kind of things rather than be like, have a kind of half-assed part with the CGI for what was going on with the chase sequence. I just was disappointed on that. And then, granted, not as much as, like, trying to, like, connect with the characters and everything, because even though I do like action sequences, I need solid character depth and exploration within a story first. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be the most complex thing ever, where you've got everything plot laid out in the beginning. But this really just didn't grab me as much as I had hoped. Now, granted, I'm definitely going to continue to watch it and see kind of what goes on, because this is Marvel finding their footing. However, this reminds me more of Falcon and the Winter Soldier kind of episodes in the back halves, more than like Loki or Hawkeye. Those are kind of like the two big ones, even though like their quality improved, because WandaVision, I'm like, okay, we need some stuff to work out. And then Falcon and the Winter Soldier was a little bit better, but of course still things to kind of figure out. Loki is like, alright, we're getting more into the better territory with certain problems and issues that need to be worked upon. And then same with Hawkeye. Like, those two were like, alright, you're kind of getting in the groove. This is like, alright, you still kind of have to figure out what you kind of want to do on your TV front. Now, biggest kind of thing I gotta tell them, if you need 6 episodes, just do 6 episodes. If you need more than 6 episodes, go longer. Alright? I understand these kind of things can be expensive, but you gotta figure out the right kind of sweet spot. If you've got a story that can just be told in a shorter amount of time, don't stretch it out too much. If you need a story that's told in a longer amount of time, don't try and squish it and compact it into 6 episodes and have everything feel like it's like thunder sharded out at the last minute. So we'll kind of have to see what's kind of going on here and how it's going to kind of balance out as everything goes on. Because we definitely have Steven's character, we've got Mark's character, we're going to have Mr. Moon Knight, I believe, because that's the kind of suit one, and I think that's kind of a different kind of character as well. So we'll have to see how that all balances out, while also getting Khonshu at some point, because at this point, he is just a kind of like sarcastic kind of voice in Mark's / Steven's head at this point, so they need to give time for that too. And hopefully we'll see some time for Ahmet as well. So, those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.